The Casser-Jayne Show airs Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern. The podcast's always available online at Casser-Jayne.com. The title of the book is Looking Good and Feeling Great, and that signals to me that you're as much interested in the outer effects of aging as the inner, right? Talk to me about the correlation.
Oh, they're very strongly correlated. That is, how you look and how you the inside of your body, because the inside of your body is really reflected in the outside. That is, it is your arteries that determine not only how much energy you have, because they supply nutrients to the cells and take away waste products. So keeping your arteries in great shape is a key, but the arteries are what supply your skin.
Looking good and feeling great. Why not, right? Hi, and welcome to the Casser-Jayne Show. I am Casser-Jayne. Today on the Casser-Jayne Show, we explore the question, is age only a number? Are we all doomed to become hunched-over seniors who take 3-inch steps and eat dinner at 4 p.m.? To challenge this fatalistic assumption, joining me at my table is best-selling co-author, along with his partner Dr. Oz, of the book You Staying Young, the Owner's Manual for Looking Good and Feeling Great, the renowned Dr. Michael Rosen. But first, the Casser-Jayne Show is brought to you by Audible.com, a leading provider of spoken audio information and entertainment. Get a free audiobook and 30-day trial today by signing up at www.audibletrial.com/The Casser-Jayne Show. And remember, the Casser-Jayne Show is always available online at HaleyCasserJayne.com and a host of venues, including iHeartRadio, Stitcher.com, Spreaker.com, TuneIn Radio, iTunes, and Blog Talk Radio. Dr. Michael Rosen is a practicing anesthesiologist and internist and an award-winning author, the Chief Wellness Officer at the Cleveland Clinic. He is the co-founder and originator of the popular Realage.com website. He has authored or co-authored 5 #1 New York Times bestsellers, including Realage, and 4 in the You series with Dr. Oz. He's the chief medical consultant to the Dr. Oz Show. Dr. Roizen has given over 1,200 lectures to professional medical groups and has been recognized with over 20 professional lectureships. He has appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show 18 times, The Today Show 17 times, 2020 3 times, CBN, CNN, CBS, Good Morning America 26 times, The Montel Williams Show, and PBS. He has been featured in magazines including Fortune, Glamour, Cosmopolitan, Good Housekeeping, Ladies' Home Journal, Reader's Digest, Men's Health, and Prevention magazines and biography. He and Dr. Oz co-author a daily newspaper column syndicated through over 65 newspapers in the United States and Canada. Today, Dr. Roizen comes to the Casser-Jayne Show to discuss his game-changing book, co-authored with Dr. Oz, updated and out in paperback, You Staying Young, the Owner's Manual for Looking Good and Feeling Great. Is age only a number? Let's talk. So I have to tell you, I love this book. I really love it. And I want to tell you why, among other reasons, that I love it. And that's because the way you and Dr. Oz presented the information. You get into the weeds and assume that your readers are intelligent enough so that they understand it. I love that. You know, you've got a great bedside manner, and it comes through in the book.
The readers are intelligent enough. You are, and all of your listeners are. If they're listening to you, they are intelligent enough. It's not, we used to say it's not rocket science, but it is. The body is pretty understandable, and the basic principles are pretty understandable. The key is that you get to control your genes, and that's the real key. The switches to your genes, we now know, are under your control. So whether they're on or off are your choices, and they're pretty simple choices.
I find that absolutely fascinating. Staying young, but let's start at the beginning. Something I wanted to ask you about that, and that is, before we even get into it, the respect for aging. Do we tend to denigrate aging and the aged in Western society? And I'd like to hear your thoughts about that before we go forward.
Well, this has nothing to do about whether the aged have respect and responsibility. I mean, obviously many other societies give the aged more respect than we do in the United States. And clearly the aged were looked on for years and years as the wise men and those who had the experience to be able to make judgments. But what this has to do with is your enjoyment of life, staying at the top of your curve till near the very end. So no matter what you want to do, you can do that. I mean, that's the amazing thing, is that with a large degree of probability, you can change the curve you're on to stay healthier at all ages. And the key point is we develop, if you will, every 10 years, you get 3 times as many errors in your cells, which means you don't have the energy, you don't have the ability to transform the nutrients you take in into useful energy. And so we feel frail and we get frail, etc., as we get older. And so the key point is, if you slow aging by 10 years, you decrease the, if you will, the defects threefold. If you decrease it by 20 years, which is entirely possible, it's 3 times 3, or you have 10 times fewer, if you will, defects, or a lot more energy for yourself to live those 20 years with. So when I say you staying young, it isn't about respect and respecting judgment and experience. It's really about how do you have the energy to be a younger person.
The title of the book is Looking Good and Feeling Great, and that signals to me that you're as much interested in the outer effects of aging as the inner, right? Talk to me about the correlation.
Oh, they're very strongly correlated. That is how you look and how you the inside of your body, because the inside of your body is really reflected in the outside. That is, it is your arteries that determine not only how much energy you have, because they supply nutrients to the cells and take away waste products. So keeping your arteries in great shape is a key, but the arteries are what supply your skin. So let me just go and give one specific example. The small arteries to your brain are what keeps your brain intact. The small arteries to your skin is what keep you from having as many wrinkles. So those are very important concepts. The concept is that if you keep your insides young, you actually will look younger because you'll keep the outsides looking young.
So I'm going to say this to the founder of Realage, Realage.com, maybe my favorite thing ever. I discovered you when you first started this years ago and took all your tests, and it was delicious, and I loved it, and I did very well, by the way.
Thank you.
Not so sure I'm doing so well right now, but normally I do well. But I want to talk to you about this. Is age just a number, or is that just one of those things that's bandied around? Talk to me about that number for those who don't know about real age.
Well, age is your calendar age is a number, and your real age is a number, and they really reflect what's going on inside you. At least your real age does. The key point is that your attitude, that is a real reflection of how old or young you are. And so when they say age is just a number, that's your calendar age is just a number. And your real age, which is the actual age of your body, can be many years older or younger than your calendar age. So I think that the reflection, age is just a number, is exactly, but it gives us a starting point that you can get younger than or you can be older than. You have that choice. So it's a nice starting point.
You mentioned this, but let's go back. Here's a statement from the press release from you staying young. Aging is not about curing disease. Rather, we need to slow the rate of aging at the cellular level and teach our bodies how to heal themselves. That's an astonishing statement. Want to elaborate?
Well, sure. The key, how do I say this? The best and easiest way to say this is that we will develop defects, we'll develop errors, we'll develop injuries. And the key isn't whether you get the injury or not. That's an important key. But the key is recovering from that injury, repairing it. And you have the power to repair it. You have the power to reverse a lot of the disease and the damage that's been done. So type 2 diabetes is one of the classic things that we get, that people get because of both our genetics and our environment. So take the example in I'll just use China and the United States. So at a body mass index of 27, that's being a little overweight, the United States citizens have a genetic predisposition on average to have 1% of us get type 2 diabetes. In China, it's 60% at the same BMI. So from a genetic standpoint of diabetes, they're much worse off. But they don't have as much diabetes as we do. Why not? Because they're more physically active and they eat less food. Now, over time, since we've exported our bad habits of if you will, lack of physical activity and eating too much of the wrong foods, and that's what we go into, right. Not only food and physical activity, and you staying young, what the appropriate ones are to stay young in both food and physical activity and managing stress. But the over time, we've exported enough of our bad eating and physical activity and stress habits to China that they will get more type 2 diabetes as a percent of the population, not only an absolute number, than we have. But the good news is that even once you get it, a lot of it, especially early on, you get to reverse it by changing what you eat, by managing your stress, and by doing physical activity.
The body is very forgiving.
The body is whoever engineered, the good Lord who engineered it did a great job. I mean, it's an amazing thing. And what we've learned so much is that it is changing which of your genes are on or not and what your proteins are affected. So let me use that example of type 2 diabetes again. Mm-hmm. Type 2 diabetes is reflected in a high level of hemoglobin A1C. And anyone who has type 2 diabetes knows their physician monitors, and they probably do too, their hemoglobin A1C. Well, all that is the hemoglobin protein with a sugar attached to it in the A1C position, and that stays attached to it for about 180 days, the length of life of that protein. So what that means is every 180 days you get to regenerate that protein totally. Well, that protein with the glucose at the sugar at the A1C position doesn't release oxygen to your tissues normally, which is one of the reasons we develop problems with eyesight and legs and kidneys, we think. Mm-hmm. But the good news is if you manage your sugar to keep it low, whether it's by physical activity or food choices or managing stress, all three of those help to keep your sugar low. When you do that, you decrease that abnormal protein and release oxygen better. So you get to reverse the problem. Now, at the same time, by changing whether those genes are on or not, that control some of the other adverse effects of diabetes, you get to turn those off. So one of the ways we've learned to manage type 2 diabetes when there's severe obesity is that obesity surgery, or what's called bariatric surgery, where they do a gastric bypass. Well, guess what? In 2 weeks, the people get rid of their diabetes. Wow. They don't get rid of the weight in 2 weeks, but they have the genes have sensed the change in physiology to such a great degree that you lose those genes. Those genes get to turn off, and there's no reflection of diabetes that's ongoing. So you get to control it, and it's because your proteins change back, and because they're made repeatedly every 180 days in the case of hemoglobin, and because you turn off genes that otherwise cause you to be aged or cause you to have diseases associated with aging.
So this genetic thing, throw it out the window? What?
No. Our genes, if you don't control them, they control you. So the genetic thing is really extremely strong. But if you look at the older we are, the less our genes per se control us, and the more our actions either turn the genes on or off. The most important study, and we didn't have it in the original edition of You Staying Young because it wasn't done, came out in 2013, is what is called the ENCODE, E-N-C-O-D-E study. And they were looking at what happens to the 80% of your DNA that isn't your genes. And it used to be called, until 2013, junk DNA, because people thought it was just junk. It was excess. No one knew why we had it. It was left over from evolution or something. But it isn't junk. What they found out is that 80 to 90% of that so-called junk DNA is really switches. So your genes are kind of like the lights on the ceiling, but the switch is what this 80 to 90% is that controls whether that light is on or not, whether that light is producing proteins or is not. It's the proteins which have our effect in our body. But if you turn genes that cause diabetics off, you're essentially turning that protein-making machinery off, and that's so that you get to control your genes to a huge degree. And it really is only since 2013 we've known that some of the things are really powerful. So we talk about inflammation as causing a lot of aging. Inflammation is what causes us, when we lose our memories and our minds, that's dementia, and a large part of both Alzheimer's disease and non-Alzheimer's dementia is caused by inflammation in your brain. Well, we know a lot of what turns inflammation on and off. So one of the things, managing stress, is one of the most powerful things at turning off, believe it or not, there are 517 genes that get turned on when you get stressed, and you get to turn all of those off when you manage stress. So it's really an amazing thing that we've learned on how you get to control those genes that control inflammation.
You use the word
stress is one of the leading causes. So are our food choices. So some of the food choices, such as saturated fat and red meat, there's this argument, can you eat butter, can you eat egg yolks? Well, it's not about the cholesterol. The major bad effect of egg yolks and of saturated fat is that it turns on genes which promote inflammation. Same with red meat. They actually turn on an inflammatory protein in your gut, in the bacteria in your gut, called trimethylamine. It produces this, and you change that into something that is very inflammatory in your body and invariably causes kidney failure and higher blood pressure and aging of your arteries and aging of your brain and aging of your immune system, meaning you're more likely to have heart disease, stroke, dementia, cancer, all of those things.
I have to stop you here, for a second, because there are two things I want you to do. One is the term inflammation. I'm not sure we all know exactly what you mean by that because we throw that around. Could you just define what you mean specifically in the case of this, of inflammation?
Well, it is almost like the Supreme Court said with pornography. I know it when I see it. So inflammation, when you see it, is a scab is the end result, or it is a red, puckered up area. And what that is really your immune system trying to kill or do away with something that it perceives as foreign to your body.
Okay.
So in the case of inflammation in your brain, your immune system essentially is attacking your brain cells, killing them, because the immune system is turned on to recognize those cells as foreign. Now, why they do that is another complex subject. But essentially, this system was developed. We have what we call an innate and if you will, a acquired or turned on system. So the innate system, let's just say a virus comes and attacks you, a cold virus. Well, you send in your immune system, the innate system goes in there and starts attacking it. And then it sends out a message to the acquired system, and it says, hey, go in there. This is a cold virus. You recognize this from 17 years ago, the last time this guy had a cold. Let's get the antibodies to it. So you attack it with both your innate and your acquired system. Now, what does that mean to you? Well, it means you're going to cough and sneeze and get rid of it, hopefully, before it devours the rest of your body. Well, the reason you cough and sneeze is you're getting rid of those dead cells that your immune system has killed, those dead viruses, and the virus has attacked some of your cells, and you get rid of those cells in the process, and that's how you prevent that virus from taking over the rest of your body. So you have inflammation there. Well, the worst kind of inflammation is obviously when you attack yourself. So when you attack your blood cells, your blood vessel cells, that's kind of horrible, right? Because you're doing away and causing damage to your blood vessels. And that's what the red meat does. You secrete this trimethylamine oxide, which attacks those cells and makes them feel damaged, and then your immune system, seeing that damage, comes in and piles on, if you will. It causes the inflammation around that attack, that damaged cells from the trimethylamine, and that's what causes it to slough. And then you say, well, I need to repair it, and you repair it by slapping on LDL cholesterol. Just it's kind of like plaster on a hole in the wall, and that's what gets you aged arteries or atherosclerosis. But in the brain, when you get this inflammation there, it starts attacking the nerve endings, and so your immune system says, hey, this nerve ending's damaged, let's kill that cell. And when you start to kill those brain cells, you lose memory and lose ability to process information.
Okay.
And so throughout the body, this is the whole process, the worst process. And I want to go one more thing in inflammation, if I can.
Sure.
When you start attacking, for instance, a cold virus, well, your immune system is busy there. What happens? It doesn't have enough range, enough extra parts to it, enough resources. It's like fighting 4 wars. If it's fighting those 3 wars in your nose, it can't protect you from cancer cells. So the cancer gets to grow and spread. And so that's why we think that when you're fighting other things, your cancers develop because the inflammation is occurring elsewhere and you don't have enough, if you will, reserve supply of immunity, of inflammation or of immune cells or inflammatory cells, if you will, to take care of and kill off the cancer cells. And all of us produce cancer cells at all times, constantly, because what happens, we have all these duplications in our body every day, and when you have these duplications, when you have cells replicating and making new cells, they're going to make errors. You can't write your name on the board 1,000 times without misspelling it. You know, even if you write your name new on the board every time, you know, if your teacher has said to you, you must write the name Hallie on the board 72 times, you're going to, by the 70th, you're going to get so bored you're going to make an error, and that's what happens. And so you can erase that. The way the body erases those errors is the immune system comes in, attacks it, and kills it. Well, if the immune system is busy fighting a cold virus, it doesn't have enough reserve to kill off all the cancer cells.
There's a lot of balance in all of this, for sure. I'm going to go a little bit off track just for a second, because about you're talking, obviously.
Now by the way, may I just make one more comment?
Absolutely.
If I can?
Sure.
We're going and talking about you staying young and some of the science, which is really fascinating. But the real gist of the book is all the action steps.
Oh, we're going to get to those.
Take to help them stay young.
Sure, absolutely.
Some of those.
Oh, we're going to get to some of those. But here's one of them I want to talk to you about, because you were talking about not red meat, not egg yolks, not whatever. But personally, I'll just tell you my own experience. Whenever I become a vegetarian, because I always think that's the best thing to do, and I'm a tiny little person, I always gain weight. I do better on a high protein, low fat, high fat diet. And then everything seems to be...
But so nuts are perfect for you.
But I gain weight on nuts, but I don't on protein from meat, from animals. Why is that?
Well, there's only one reason you could do that, is you're not absorbing. That is, you're malabsorbing. Your system malabsorbs.
I think that's true.
Red meat and fat. So it would, in other words, it doesn't make sense that you gain more weight from the protein and saturated fats, what we call the inflammatory proteins and saturated fats in animal meat, and the same amount of protein and healthy fats in, for example, nuts, cause you to gain weight. So the only reason that could occur is if your bacteria in your intestine is such that red meat is actually causing an inflammatory reaction inside your intestine, which causes it to malabsorb, to not absorb the calories and the proteins and the saturated fat that you're eating with the red meat.
That's interesting. I guess that, taking it out of the personal, is everybody the same, or do some people metabolize different things better than others?
Oh, everyone is. It is not only you, but it is what your bacteria does. So one of the great advances, and we have a lot of the information in the book on it, is the information about your microbiome. Now, that's a funny word, but it is. You have 100 trillion cells in your body that aren't you. They're bacteria and viruses and fungi, etc., that are in and on you. And the majority of those are in your intestine. And so when you say, are all of us different? Yeah, you will be different in 20 years than you are now, and you're different now than you were 20 years ago, not because of just you, but because the bacteria that you carry are different. And those bacteria they're the first ones that get every snap at everything you eat. Right? The bacteria eat it, you don't, first. And so although you grab it and get it into your tummy and you enjoy the taste of it, the bacteria are the ones who digest it, and they do things in a very different way than other people's bacteria.
So you always have to take the personal into consideration.
Absolutely. So so what you said is very possible. You could gain weight on the same number of calories of vegetarian or vegetable-based food compared to animal food. It's not common, but it is basically either your bacteria or your gut is causing you to malabsorb that animal protein and fat compared to a vegetarian protein and fat.
Fascinating. I'm talking with Dr. Michael Rosen. I want to say Rosen because my whole family are Rosens. Dr. Michael Rosen, whose wonderful book is You Staying Young, The Owner's Manual for Looking Good and Feeling Great. One of the great predictors of aging is one's own perception of one's own health. Why? That's fascinating to me.
Well, in fact, we think you know more about your body than anyone else, and this is probably one of the most fascinating things, is that if you think compared to others your age that your health is poor or bad, compared to average, good, or very good compared to others your age. If you think it's poor or bad, you're more than 17 times more likely to get a serious illness and or die than if you rated your health as fair, very good, or good. Fair, good, or very good. And that is, you know your body, and you instinctively know how you're feeling. So if you're feeling poor or bad compared to others your age, you should really do something about it. But why is that? We don't know, but it may again stem from inflammation. Inflammation causes you to feel tired and exhausted and not very good, and even depressed at times. Whereas if you're zapped on life, if you have some reason to live, if you're feeling good and feeling energetic, then you probably don't have unknown inflammation in your body to any great degree or to as great a degree, and you probably will rate your health higher than if you feel poor or bad.
Okay.
Now, it's not just feeling poor or bad. It's feeling poor or bad compared to others your age. So when you go into if you will, a retirement community, my mother-in-law is 96 and lives in a retirement community. God bless her. And she, when you say, how are you feeling, she could give you a list, but she always gives you positive. And she always said, compared to everybody else, I'm doing really good. Right. I'm living on my own. I'm able to walk. I go to the museum. I mean, she's got a busier social schedule than I do. And the interesting thing is, it's compared to other people in that retirement community who are over 90. So she compares herself with others her age, and she says, I'm excellent.
So how much does mind over matter have to do in all of this?
Say it again.
Mind over matter.
Matter. We don't, the truth is, we don't know the correct answer to that question. Clearly, the greatest ager is mental condition. That is, your stress. Stress is the greatest ager of all. And 3 stressful events in 1 year. You're forced to move. You take a new job, and someone in your family very close to you is sick or is dying. Those are 3 of the most serious 13 stressful events, and they make you 32 years older in the year they occur if you don't manage them. But if you talk to other people, if you have friends around, if you talk the problems out, and if you learn how to manage your stress, and we have a lot of tips in You Staying Young about how to manage your stress, then they only age you 2 years. So you have cut down an enormous amount of aging, even though the same events have occurred. That's mind over matter. Now, conversely, just to let you know some of the reason I'm saying we don't really know the answer to that question you're asking, conversely, we're learning that those same bacteria that I talked about in your gut, if you have different bacteria than, for example, your twin might get depressed and much older, not care about managing that stress and just age from it. Whereas you, because of the different bacteria inside you, don't get the same proteins from the same food and feel great. And then they're able to manage the stress. So what we're learning is that the food you eat usually calls forth different bacteria, that is, bacteria like some foods and not others, and the way those bacteria function can cause some of the mind that goes over the matter. So it's matter over matter in that case. That is the matter of the bacteria causing your mind change, which affects how you do and how much you manage stress and do other activities and other choices that are healthy.
Before we go into what to remedies, if you will, I want to ask you about sugar.
Sure.
Talk to me about sugar.
Okay, so sugar is, you can't live without blood sugar, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the cells of, there are three types of cells that absolutely can't live without sugar. One is your brain cells, second is your eyes, which are really your brain, and the third are your gonads, or the testes and ovaries require sugar. Now, that said, everything we eat gets turned into sugar. So it just depends on how high your blood sugar level is. So assuming you have normal blood sugar regulation, you keep your blood sugar in a fairly normal range from, say, 70 to 130 or something like that. But if you have diabetes, it goes way outside those ranges. Well, even above 110, the sugar level in your blood changes the proteins that are both in your blood and on your cells and causes those proteins to dysfunction if your sugar level is high. So we know, for example, that blood sugar, high blood sugar, causes the change in the proteins lining your arteries. Those proteins that are like grout, the cells of your arteries are linked together just like the tiles in the bathroom, and in between them are grout, or is the equivalent of grout, but that's a protein. When you get sugar on that protein, it weakens the grout. So then a little bit of high blood pressure comes by, you get stimulated by something, you raise your blood pressure, it causes a tear in that grout. Well, what do you do, which is essentially a tear in your artery? You repair that tear by slapping on some plaster. The plaster you slap on is LDL cholesterol, the lousy cholesterol, remembered by the first initial L, lousy cholesterol, and that causes your arteries to get harder and you to get atherosclerosis or plaques. So sugar is really bad because it ages your arteries really quickly. But it also causes your immune system to develop inflammation. And the worst of those, the worst case of this is sugar feeds cancer cells. The cancer cells live off of sugar, and so they multiply. So the worst thing you can have for example, prostate cancer like Warren Buffett has, so the worst thing he could have is a Coca-Cola, which he loves drinking apparently, because Coke has the straight sugar that feeds those cancer cells and allows that cancer to grow faster. Same with breast cancer. You don't want to have straight sugar if you've got breast cancer or any other cancer, because the sugar feeds the cancer and causes it to grow faster.
That's absolutely fascinating to me. Quickly, this food versus vitamins. Why can't we get what we need through the food that we eat? Is it because of what's happened to the environment and what we've done to our food, or is it something changing in the way we are, or we never could really get our total nutrients properly with just food alone, and we're just recognizing that now?
Well, it's tough to get the nutrients through food, not so much because the food is devoid of them, although it has, a lot of the ground has been sucked out, a lot of the nutrients have been sucked out of the ground and are in other things, but more because it requires a variety of food and really conscientious eating. You've got to really eat a rainbow of fruits and vegetables as well as the other foods to get all the minerals and vitamins you need. And it's very tough. For example, just to get the right amount of vitamin D2 or D3, assuming you're not exposed to the sun, or even assuming you live north of the line between Los Angeles and Atlanta. Now, I know L.A. isn't that way, but if you lived north of that line, Miami isn't that way. If you live north of that line between L.A. and Atlanta, then you couldn't get, the sun doesn't activate the vitamin D for you to have active vitamin D on it, so you got to get it from food.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can you get it from food? You'd have to have roughly 28-ounce glasses of milk a day if you're going to get it. So it's very tough that way. Or you have to have about 18 ounces of wild salmon for that day, or you have to have about 40 ounces of farm-raised salmon to get the vitamin D. And if I'm giving you the foods with the most vitamin D in it. Very tough to get it. So that's an example. Magnesium and potassium, if you don't love fruits and vegetables, those are very tough to get in the right amounts. So if you will, 93% of us, if you just looked at the three I've mentioned, vitamin D, magnesium, and potassium, over 93% of us don't get even 80% of the daily value for those, for any one or more of those three. That's 94% of us, 93+% of us are short of that. And if you looked at all the 16 essential vitamins and minerals, and we aren't even counting the essential proteins or essential fats, 99% of us don't get 100% of what we need. So it is that's why we think that a multivitamin decreases cancer rates in men by about 18%.
That's vast.
Non-prostate cancer. So there's some, and as you know in the book, we have a section on your essential supplements, because there are some that we consider, based on the way we normally eat in America, are essentially needed for you to function optimally. And they're not, we don't want you taking big doses. And it's a half of a multivitamin morning and night as an example. Some extra vitamin D, usually you want to get it measured, but it's 1,000 to 2,000 international units for the typical person. Some extra calcium and magnesium. It's not a lot. It's 600 milligrams of calcium. You don't want to go more than 600 because that increases the risk of prostate, and what's normally found for the prostate is eventually found for the breast. So normally you don't want to get more than 600 in a supplement of calcium. And so there are some, we mention 8 that most of us take, one of those being a probiotic, and that's to increase the diversity of bacteria inside your gut, because that is one of the things that's necessary. Now, you don't need a probiotic if you're eating sauerkraut or kimchi or fermented food, because it's already there. But for those who don't, that's what we say you should have a probiotic.
So your number one, let's say it's you. What is the number one thing you recommend to people to get them back to super health and control the aging process, if you will? Talk to me. What's your baby?
The first thing you do is, you're right, is you say, I'm going to do it, is make up your mind that this is a choice and I'm going to make it. And the second thing is figure out who your buddy will be, because it's very hard to do this by yourself. So you want a support system and you want to have a buddy. And that buddy usually is a female buddy, because guys are lousy buddies. And the third thing is start with something you think you can do. So one is say, I'm going to do this, and I'm committing to doing it. Life is not going to get in the way. I'm going to stay young, so I'll be there for my kids and grandkids rather than them having to take care of me. Second, you get a buddy who's going to, you commit to with that buddy what you're going to do. And then the third, now you can say it's 5 minutes of meditation morning and night. That's really important for stress. I like the third to be getting a pedometer and walking 10,000 steps a day, building to walking it, because it's a concrete number that you can get to, you can talk to your buddy with, and virtually anyone can do. And so the reason I like that rather than any other choice is solely because you can monitor yourself, and then once you feel better, and it will make you, when you start walking and do that regularly, it will make you feel better, and once you're doing that, then you can add things like stress management, or making the right food choices, or choosing the right supplements or vitamins to take.
Another thing that you're really into cutting calories. You really think that that's a big problem for Americans, too many calories, right?
Well, we know it's a problem for most of us, and 70% of us are overweight. But there's good data, and we put it in the book, on at least periodic calorie restriction. Now, I'll tell you what I mean by that. Decreases your rate of aging. In 21 of 23 animal species, decreasing calories 15 to 20% from what would maintain normal weight extends their life about 100%. So it would mean that instead of living to 80, you'd live to 160, but you'd live with the quality of life of a 40 to 45-year-old. Now, in humans, no one has done that. It's really too tough to cut calories every day. So, but there are data that intermittent, or what is really called periodic fasting, for 5 days every 5 days every month, you cut the calories down to about half of what you normally have. And that seems to maybe even have a better benefit over what would be called total calorie restriction, doing 15 or 20% less every day, because the refeeding part, that is when you go back to normal calories, after it's only 5 days a month, you're at roughly 750 to 1,000 calories. When you go back to 2,000 or 2,200 or whatever you have, it apparently regenerates your stem cells. And keeping your stem cells normal is really important. Now, we don't have quite enough data on it, but it's one of the things that really seems to be extremely important in both the calorie restriction period. When you go down, you get rid of, if you will, cells that are aging and not doing well, but hanging around. And so you kill those off, and on the refeeding part, when you go back to your normal, you regenerate what we call pluripotent stem cells, that is, stem cells that can turn into any organ. And those regenerated stem cells rush in and repair and replace those abnormal cells. Now, we've only got a couple of studies showing that that really works in humans, and we don't have any studies showing it extends life yet, just because those studies haven't been done. This is too new. But we have a lot of new material in you staying young. But the key point is that apparently 5 days of calorie restriction every month may be enough to, in fact, make you much younger.
Well, live
with much more energy all the time.
That makes me feel better than having to do it constantly. This is an informative and fun book. It's both. And there's that's quite a feat for a medical book, I have to tell you. And I love the factoids in this book. Do you hear me?
We love putting them in, so
Did you have fun with picking those out? Because I got to tell you, let me do two. This one ought to interest men. They can make their their penis larger.
Right.
I like that one. What's the story? Should we go there or not?
You can go any place you want.
Let's go there.
Since I'm a physician, there's a no excuses zone. You can go any place you want. No embarrassment. No,
I just want everybody to know how wonderful this book is, because it's all of the above. That's why I liked it so much, and that's why I brought you on. But yeah.
Thank you very much.
No, that's true. That's really true. So that's one thing. There's one for women, too, by the way. It says that if you were, that as if we needed any more evidence that female brains trump men's brains, women's pineal glands are actually larger than men's.
Right. The pineal gland that's correct.
You guys must have had a blast putting these all together. So listen to me. Let's talk Fountain of Youth. There is always the proverbial Fountain of Youth that we're all after. Maybe something different than we thought it would be, right? Maybe what you guys have come up with, this is the Fountain of Youth. I read that you speculated by 2023, one of the 14 areas of aging might have a breakthrough that will allow us to live until, 160 with the same quality of life as at an age 45. And there's been a lot of people who've said, everything you've done is proven to be true, so why would that not be true?
Well, again, this is a prediction, so we don't have the data done yet. We said, it's a funny thing, I sat, next to Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil is the Chief Innovation Officer at Google. I don't know what his current position is when it changed last week from Google to Alphabet, or whether it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. I can't remember. But anyway, Ray Kurzweil and I sat next to each other, and he was pumping me for information about longevity in the human body, and I was pumping him for information about chips. He's the one who predicted to the day when Big Blue, the IBM computer, would beat the chess champion. And he told me, he said, the data is so good that solar power will, assuming everything else is equal, this is in 2000 and I think 4 or 5, he said solar power by 2020 will be 10% of the U.S. power grid, assuming we get one decent breakthrough in storage of batteries. And so, he's coming pretty true. We're quickly approaching more and more solar power. And I said to him, the data is true. There are 14 areas of aging. We were beginning to write You Staying Young at that time. And if we get a breakthrough in any one of these, you or I will live to be able to be 160 with the same quality of life you had maybe at age 40 or 45. And the research is, if I was going to bet on a breakthrough, it would be on the one area, and, you can't because there are 14 areas, and we go through each one in the book. But there are 14 areas, and there are action steps related to each of them that's slow aging now. But if you get a real big breakthrough, so we know that this periodic fasting looks like, and even cutting calories to where you maintain your weight is something to have you live longer and live healthier. And maybe it's 5 years now. But if there's a breakthrough on the periodic fasting, if there's a drug that does the same thing, or a group of 3 drugs that you can take, or medications or foods that you can take that do the same thing as periodic fasting does and make it automatic for you so you don't have to suffer, that would be a really big breakthrough. And if it's like the animal models, as good as what they do to certain genes, then we call it the sweet 16 gene complex, because you stay 16, but rather than 16, you stay much younger. If you're able to do that, then you really do, if you will, we could have this breakthrough. So the prediction is the amount of money in aging research, the amount of science and interest and intensity of scientific is growing exponentially, meaning if you take an exponential, if you take linear steps across the room, you took 30 linear steps, you go 30 yards. Well, you take 30 exponential steps, meaning the first step is 1 step, the second step is 3 steps, the third step is 9 steps, etc. If you take 30 exponential steps, it's over 1 billion yards. Well, we're now doing the exponential period of research in these 14 areas, and we started that in about 2001. Any one of these breaks through, you and I get to live to be 160, and it's probable, if you're saying when's the most probable period, it's sometime between now and 2030, with the most probable years being, that's right, you quoted right, sometime 2023, 2024.
I think it's fascinating. It's exciting. Listen, you end the book with what you call a life-changing 14-day plan that will give us action steps to reboot our health and turn back the clock. I want everybody to know that if for no other reason, that is worth buying this book. This is my Bible. I'm carrying it around with me now, so I want everybody to go and pick it up. I do have one last question.
Really nice.
I know I'm very serious about that. Here's my one last thing, okay? One last question.
Sure.
What's Dr. Oz really like?
He is just the most wonderful. What you see is what you get. In fact, you get someone who's even more gracious, kinder, and nicer than the person you see on TV. The only thing I can say, people always ask, tell me something bad about him. Well, the only thing bad about him is you don't want him ever to drive, because he is relatively impatient, and if he's at a red light and no one's at the other place going through it, he will just go through it. So you don't want to ever drive with Dr. Oz. But other than that, he is the most gracious, nicest, most wonderful human being you could ever imagine. I mean, he and I have worked together for, 12 or 13 years now, and we've never had a contract, just a handshake. It's kind of like Jersey boys. It's a Jersey handshake.
I like that. I'm a Jersey girl, so I really, really, really like that. Somebody just sent me a quote. One of our fans, they said, it's a Woody Allen quote. It says, "I expect to live forever. So far, so good." How about...
That's right.
Isn't that true? How about you? I'd say so far, so great. Agree? Thanks.
I agree.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
You.
Thanks so much.
Wonderful talking with you. Thank you. You're just a great interviewer. Thank you. Your audience is really lucky to have you.
I think you're my new best friend. I've been speaking with Dr. Michael Rosen, along with Dr. Oz, author of You Staying Young, the owner's manual for looking good and feeling great, by way of Scribner, an imprint of Simon & Schuster. For more information on staying young, visit Dr. Roizen on Facebook under Dr. Michael Rosen, and on Twitter his handle is Dr. Mike Roizen. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Hallie Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec LLC. Associate producer, Suzanne Probst. Music by Tony Rosales Jazz. Visit HallieCasserJayne.com.